Hello, my name is LoG and welcome to Quickies number 9, where I show you something that I think is cool in 5 minutes or less. Today we're going to talk about connecting continuous lines through chords as they change. So let's get some chords first. How about G minor, C minor? So we've got our chords. Now we need to figure out what is the strong sound of both of those chords. So the easy answer is, of course, the chord tones, 1, 3, 5, or 1 flat 3, 5 in this case, because they're both minor, of both chords. But we're going to give ourselves a little bit more to play. So instead of just the arpeggio, we're also going to open up the pentatonic scale of both sounds. So that's 1 flat 3, 4, 5 flat 7 of both of those chords, G minor and C minor. You want to be careful to not play too many notes of each sound, like a full scale, because in this case, for instance, if I play G minor, C minor, that feels like a 6 to a 2, right? And if I play the full scale built off 6 and then the full scale built off 2, that's the same scale, right? We're playing the same notes. So when you start playing too big of a sound, too large of a scale, you start to lose the unique quality of both chords. So I would actually keep it simple. Keep it pentatonic with, targeting chord tones or maybe hitting like a 2 or something like that extra, but don't get too crazy by playing the full sounds of both of those chords, because then, like I said, you lose the uniqueness of each chord. That's step 1. Step 2 is get some sort of track or tempo. So I have a metronome right here set at 70 BPM. You can do this with a drum machine as well. But do not play over an actual backing track, meaning the actual chords happening in the background, whether it's on guitar or keyboard. The reason why is many people, when they're practicing this in the early stages, they tend to play what I call reactionary, meaning they let the chords change in the track and then they react to it. They say, oh, the chords change, all right, let me switch. But you can't really do that if you really want to be able to do this type of thing. You need to be able to make those active choices way in advance before the chord actually changes, so that the moment the chord changes, you are also changing at that same instant. You can't react to the chord change. You have to actively be right along with that change as it happens. So the way we're going to practice this is just a tempo, no backing track, no chords, and it's up to us, it's up to the lead player to make the chords audible in the sound. And the way we're going to do that is set aside a certain amount of time per chord. So how about a bar per chord, 4 beats per chord, and at the end of that bar, we are going to actively make the choice to play a chord tone of the next chord to really spell it out, and then continue playing in that sound with the rest of the pentatonic. So I'll show you what I mean. This is 70 BPM. I'm going to play really slow, just eighth notes for now. So I'll start right here. G first, G minor. C minor, bam. G minor. C minor. G minor. C minor. Then G minor, right? So I am again choosing to lock in on those chord tones right at the end of that bar. I'm choosing to land on specific notes, which I'll talk about here in a second. Let's try that double the tempo. How about 16th notes? Same exact idea, just 16ths. So that whole time, again, after every bar, I'm targeting the chord tones of each chord so that the chord change is audible within the lead. Now, I'm not just playing any chord tone, by the way. For instance, both of these chords, now this isn't the case with all chord changes, but with these chords, both chords have G as a chord tone, right? The root of G is G. The fifth of C is also G. So if I'm playing G minor, and then I want to spell out a C minor chord, if I just hit G, I might think, yeah, G is the fifth of C minor, it's going to work. But not really, because it still sounds like G minor because I'm just playing another G. So the best choice, if you really want that chord to really sound like it has changed, especially if you're playing slower, you want to target the unique note of that chord, a note that is not in the other chord. So for instance, the E flat, the third of C minor, right? That note is not in the G minor. It's not in the arpeggio and it's not in the pentatonic. So when I play that note, that's a note that I have not played in the entirety of the G minor bar. but when I do hit that note, it sounds, oh, something is different. It sounds like a chord has changed because that's a unique note, a note that's tied to the C minor. Same sort of thing when I move back to the G, I'm going to target the D, the fifth of G. Why? Because that note is in G minor, of course, but it's not necessarily in C minor. It's not in the arpeggio, and it's not in the pentatonic scale. It's not that weird of a note. I mean, it's the 2 of C, which is a pretty normal note to play. But again, when you play that note, it'll be different enough to really sound like something has changed. And then, of course, you continue within that sound. So that's something I would look at. Look at whatever chord change you're playing. Find the unique note that lives in this chord that doesn't necessarily live in the other chord, and target for that note or shoot for that note to really make the sound loud and clear. The next thing you want to do when you're doing this is these decisions that I'm talking about need to be made way in advance. You cannot wait till the last minute before the chord changes to choose the note that you're trying to play. You have to make the choice way in advance. Of course, sometimes, depending on what you're doing, you'll have to make a last minute choice, but you want to shoot for something earlier on. Maybe like if I have 4 beats per chord, maybe on the 3rd beat or something like that, or the 4th beat, have the choice made. So I'll show you what I mean by that. 16th notes again, I'm going to call off the note before I play it, and then I'll lock in on the downbeat. Here we go. G minor. I'm going to play the 3rd of C. 5th of G. 3rd of C. Root of G. Root of C. Root of G. 3rd of C. Now, most of the, sometimes I wasn't 100% correct. I was playing the note a little early, but that's okay. Still locking in to kind of imply that chord change. So this is something you want to try. You want to make these choices way in advance. Have the sound in your head in advance so you can lock in and make sure those sounds are pretty obvious. So you could really do this with any pair of sounds. I'm playing G minor, C minor here, but how about like G minor to like D7, right? That's a very different sound. Now, because these chords are pretty different, we don't have to try to target like specific notes. If we just jump in and start playing D7, it's gonna be pretty obvious that the chord has changed because the sound is pretty different. Same thing if I played like G minor then like A flat dominant. Like those are very different sounds, so I could just kind of slide in and not have to worry about hitting certain notes, and I know it'll work. So let's try a little bit of that. Here's G minor to D7, right? So G minor. How about something else? How about G minor to A flat dominant like I mentioned earlier? Here we go. 3 and G minor. Back to G. So you can really do this with any pair. I would just look at which chords are you trying to practice, which chords do you find to be difficult, or maybe you're writing a tune or working on a tune or playing a cover that's got a weird chord change. Just pick those 2 chords, do exactly this. Make sure you're really spelling out those chord changes in your lead. If you cannot hear the chord changes in your lead, then you are not targeting the correct notes. You have to target those chord tones, and if the chords are similar, like G minor, C minor, you have to make that real specific choice to bring out that extra color note, the unique note that lives in one chord but not the other. Hopefully this stuff makes sense. See you in the next one.